Hi, this is Adam Norman. I'm your philosophy teacher. Today I'd like to just review week one. What is philosophy? So, philosophy, there are three definitions, only two of which are good, and the third one is my own. The first is that philosophy is the love of wisdom. This is, pretty self serving, but it comes from the Greek philo, for love, and Sophie, for wisdom. Philosophy is the love of wisdom. Philosophy is also often called a footnote to Socrates. This is kind of an inside joke because Socrates was the first philosopher and the best philosopher. He's amazing. So a lot of people say that Socrates did everything that there was to do when it came to philosophy, and the rest of us have just been sort of fooling about ever since, not doing a very good job of it. There's a certain amount of truth to this because philosophy, since Socrates, has accomplished nothing. Not a single thing has been accomplished within philosophy. No philosopher can point at something and say, yep, we did that. We put a man on the moon, or we built a bridge, or we baked a cake. Nope. Philosophy bakes no bread. But that's okay. A lot of other wonderful things that you do aren't very useful either. Things like food. Beautiful food. It's not very good. And music. Music. Totally useless. Philosophy is useless too. I say that philosophy is bad answers to good questions. These are the same questions that Socrates asked 2,500 years ago. We're still trying to answer them, but we keep coming up with new answers, none of which is good, but all of which are interesting. I'm going to give you some of those questions today as we try to delineate the four areas of philosophy. Here are the four areas of philosophy: metaphysics, ethics, logic, and epistemology. Each of these deals with a question within its own realm. So let's start with metaphysics. Metaphysics asks a rather stupid question. Well, it seems stupid. What is real? This is maybe the most difficult and profound question of all. It's so profound that it seems silly. But the thing is that you think you know what is real, but you really don't. So you probably think that atoms are real. You subscribe to the atomist theory of metaphysics. Okay, maybe. But here's an easy problem. This is my friend Derek when he was a baby, and this is my friend Derek about 10 years ago. What do these two guys have in common? No, seriously. When Derek was a baby, he was about 9 pounds, and when Derek as an adult is about 180 pounds. So really 95% of his matter has changed. All of the atoms in his body have come and gone. Something about him remains the same though. What is that? When you try to answer that question, you're doing metaphysics. The Toronto Maple Leafs. Maybe you liked the Leafs when you were a kid and you still like them today. Not a single player on the team from when you were a kid is on the team today. What remained the same? Is there something about the Leafs? Well, okay, other than that they are perennially stinky, is there something about the Leafs that remains essential to who they are? Metaphysics asks this question, what is real? Because it's surprisingly difficult. If you don't believe me about people or the Leafs, try answering some of these questions. Atoms. Atoms are real. Okay, sure. What about energy? Is energy real? Sure, right? I mean, it's all around us. It does stuff. But it's not made up of atoms, is it? So it's a different kind of reality. What about emptiness? Is emptiness real? Because you can't have atoms without emptiness, right? I mean, there's just, okay, except maybe in a black hole or a neutron star, but you get the idea. Every atom you've ever seen has been surrounded by emptiness. So what category of being does emptiness fall into? When you answer that question, you're doing metaphysics. Dark matter, dark energy, space, time. Are these real? Or are they something else? So you say, then, atoms are real. Okay, let's give you that. Atoms are real. Sure, and space is real too, the emptiness of space. Atoms follow laws of nature, right? What are laws of nature? Whoa, they're a different kind of reality. Is How do you explain that? Are there things that are not atoms that are real? Like time? Is that real? Is math real? I happen to think that math is quite real. Is God real? He's not made up of atoms. So when you try to answer what the different categories of being are, you're trying to do metaphysics. Here's an example that makes this super clear. Do you ever really think about how a compass works? These drive me totally crazy. There's a magnetic field that surrounds the Earth that is not made up of anything. And somehow, this thing without mass moves a thing, the needle of the compass, that has mass. How does something that is nothing move something that is something? That's crazy. And what's even weirder is that the something that is nothing somehow reaches out and touches the thing that is something and then pulls it back to where it came from, the North Pole. Come on. That is the craziest thing. Think about that for a while. Compasses are nuts, and they're in your cell phone. Like, there's nothing more real than a compass, but the magnetic field is super not real. This is metaphysics. Okay. So, the second field of philosophy that we're going to discuss is ethics. Ethics tries to answer a really simple question. It's a lot less sort of mind-blowing than metaphysics. It tries to answer what is good and bad. And more importantly, it tries to answer why. This is because you think you know, but you don't. So here's an example. Imagine you're in a lifeboat lost at sea with 3 other people. An old, skinny man, a juicy, fat boy, and a pregnant woman. If you don't eat today, you're all going to die, and there's no food. Who do you eat? Almost everybody says an old, skinny man. Why? You're making some sort of ethical judgment about age and saying, well, he's kind of reached the end of his life. He should be the one who sacrifices himself so that we all may live. Weirdly, lots of people say a juicy fat boy. I think that this is because I call him juicy. Somehow this makes you want to eat him. I don't get that, but okay. The juicy fat boy is a very popular choice, but nobody ever goes for the pregnant woman. Why is that? When we try to explain this, we're doing ethics. How do you value a human life? This is the kind of ethics of, you may have heard of these things, John Stuart Mill, utilitarianism, and Immanuel Kant, deontology. Those are the two sort of ethical schools of thought. When we apply those schools of thought to practical questions, we come up with answers. Okay, there's another kind of ethics, and that's personal ethics. And that's the ethics of Aristotle, who we're going to discuss in week 5. He's maybe my favorite philosopher. I love Aristotle so much. Aristotle does a different kind of ethics, and he does the sort of ethics of very personal ethics. Rather than an interpersonal ethics, he does like personal ethics, like what is wrong with Donald Trump? I'm not going to come down hard on Donald Trump in this, although I'm certainly no fan. But there's something weird about Donald Trump. And I mean this seriously, he's not presidential. I think we can all agree that he breaks all the norms of what a president should be. Even Republicans agree he's an extremely unusual president. Why is that? And what does that mean? Aristotle could tell us a lot about the norms of presidency and leadership. Plato can tell us what leaders are for. And Aristotle could tell us how he should behave and why he should behave like that. So philosophy, I mean, I say it's useless, but it does give us a sort of framework with which we can discuss very real contemporary things. The third school of philosophy, the third field of philosophy, is logic. Logic tries to take rational thought, turn it into a system so that errors can be exposed. And it does this doing something that looks a lot like math. This is a sentential logic question, and it says, oh, sorry, it's predicate logic, doesn't matter. For all x, x is either a or x is t, and it's not the case that x is a and x is t. That's a super hard way of saying what George Bush said years ago: you're either with America or you're with the terrorists. What logic does is it tries to take this idea and systematize it so that we can analyze it and see what's wrong with it. I love logic, but it's super hard. So that is all the logic we're going to do. The fourth and final area of philosophy is epistemology, and it answers the question, how do you know what you know? This seems really straightforward. You were taught it by teachers. It's not so simple. Have you seen The Matrix? In The Matrix, Neo somehow knows that he's living in the Matrix. How does he know that? How does he know that the Matrix is fake and that the real world is real? How do you know that you're not living in some sort of simulation? How do you know that you're not asleep? What do you know for certain? Take this very simple question. Add the numbers 202 and 199. You should be able to do that in your head. 401. Are you sure that it's 401? Yes, you're 100% sure. Now imagine you had a bag that said 400 marbles on it, and you dumped out all the marbles and you counted the marbles, and you came up with 401. Would you be sure that you counted to 401, or would you doubt yourself and think, the bag was probably right, I am probably wrong? I think you would probably be less certain about what you counted. What I'm trying to do here is tell you that there are two different ways that you know what you know. You know what you know through consulting your mind. This is called a priori knowledge. And you know what you know through consulting your senses. This is called a posteriori knowledge. Philosophy has broken up all knowledge into two parts. Not without a lot of debate, mind you, but two parts: a posteriori and a priori knowledge. Philosophy is, in short, bad answers to good questions. 4 questions in particular. What is real? That's the question of metaphysics. What is rational thought? That's the question of logic. What is good and bad and why? That's the question of ethics. And how do you know what you know? That's the question of epistemology. Philosophy is also a certain comfort in asking what may seem like stupid questions. You probably figured that by now. You probably figured that out by now. We talked about, eating people and whether or not you're living in the Matrix and whether or not numbers are real. These are, I'll grant you, kind of odd. I hope that you'll get used to them, and I hope that these questions will generate some really good ideas. And I hope most of all that you enjoy taking this class as much as I enjoyed teaching it. Okay, that's all for this week. I will see you in class.